Welcome to the Spiritual Awakening Path. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're diving into a powerful topic, Why You Feel Drained by People After Spiritual Awakening, Carl Jung. We'll explore the energetic and psychological shifts that make old connections feel heavy, what Jung discovered about social fatigue after deep inner change, and how to honor your need for space without losing compassion for others. So if you've ever felt like awakening pulled you further from people instead of closer, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll see that this isn't a sign of weakness. It's a natural part of your transformation. Why you feel above people after awakening, and why that's just another mask, you know. When I first stepped onto the path of awakening, I honestly believed I was climbing to a higher rung of consciousness. I felt different. I'd look around and see people still caught up in the same old conversations, the same habits that now felt so foreign to me. And then a part of me began to think, I've gone further than they have. I see things they don't. Have you ever felt that way? If you have, I want you to pause for a moment and look deeper into that feeling. Because at its core, it might just be another mask. We call it the spiritual ego. It's so subtle that even when you believe you've stripped away all masks, you might still be wearing one, just gold-plated. I once met a woman during a therapy session. She was about 62. She told me that after a major life event, she began meditating, reading spiritual books, and felt she had woken up to many truths. But then she lost interest in her old friends. Instead of chatting about kids or neighborhood gossip, she felt drained, and even a little pity for them. She said, "They just don't understand. They haven't awakened." I smiled, not to agree, but to invite her to look again. I asked, "Are you sure you're higher up, or are you just standing in a different place?" Because real awakening never puts you above anyone. It simply opens the space for you to stand beside them and see both the light and the shadow in every person, including yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Meaning, whenever we think someone is less than or behind us, we might actually be seeing an unhealed part of ourselves reflected back at us. Imagine this, you're standing in front of a giant mirror. In it, you don't just see yourself, you also see the people you think are not awakened. Every gesture, every word from them is a little reflection of you. Sometimes the parts you love, sometimes the parts you want to reject. If you push them away, you also push away the chance to see yourself fully. Modern psychology even backs this up. Humans connect and empathize through shared experience, not through ranking who's ahead or behind. When our brain activates its mirror neurons, we literally feel another person's emotions as if they were our own. But if we label them as lower, we shut that part of the brain down. Empathy closes, judgment takes over, and that's when the spiritual ego starts talking. True awakening is realizing that everyone is on their own path, and no one is in front or behind. Some are at a bend, some are climbing, some are resting, and none of that is a reason to withhold compassion. I often tell my students, you don't have to pull anyone up, and you don't have to stoop down to meet them. Just stand steady, open your heart, and let them know you're here as a fellow traveler. When you take off the mask of, "I'm more awakened than you," you'll feel an incredible lightness. Conversations become easier, even if the other person is still talking about the weather or the news, because you no longer need them to change for you to feel comfortable. You and we're learning the same lesson. Awakening is not about separating yourself from the world. It's about loving it more truly, without the lens of ego, even the spiritual kind. And when you see that, you'll realize no one is beneath you, no one is above you. There are only souls, each walking their own road, and sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to walk together for a while. There's a stage that almost everyone on the awakening journey has to go through. I call it the season of solitude. It sounds sad, doesn't it? But it's not the dark, heavy loneliness you might imagine. It's more like winter, quiet, a little cold, but also the time when the soil rests, preparing for the spring to bloom. I remember a man who once came to see me. He was 55, a businessman who had spent nearly his entire life in endless meetings, parties, and social obligations. Then, after a major life event, he started meditating every morning. Slowly, he lost interest in large gatherings, Old friends would invite him out, but he'd make excuses. His wife asked, "Why don't you see people as much anymore?" He just shook his head. He didn't fully understand it himself. I told him, "Maybe you're in your season of solitude." He looked at me, surprised, as if I'd just given him something that was both strange and comforting at the same time. Have you ever felt that way? The people around you are still there, but the space between you and them feels wider. Not because you're upset with them, but because your soul needs room to breathe. From a spiritual perspective, this is when you're clearing your energetic field. You're like a glass that's been filled with too many impurities. Heavy conversations, emotions borrowed from others, obligations you carried just to avoid disappointing someone. The season of solitude is when you pour it all out so the glass can be empty again. Modern science has its own explanation. When you shift your awareness, your nervous system needs time to recalibrate. Environments that are too noisy or overstimulating can overwhelm your brain. Just like a body needs rest after surgery, the soul needs rest after an awakening. But I know, for many people, especially in their 50s or 60s, that feeling of, people call me less, or I'm seeing fewer friends, can trigger the question, am I becoming lonely? And that's when I want you to remember, solitude and loneliness are two very different states. Loneliness is when you crave connection, but can't find it. Solitude is when you choose stillness because you know it's healing you. I often tell my students, trust your season of solitude, because once your energy is cleansed, you'll naturally draw in new relationships, people who speak to you with genuine warmth, not out of obligation. They come not to fill an empty space, but to create something real with you. I want you to picture this. You're standing in a softly lit room. There's no noise, just the sound of your heartbeat. Out there, new friends are slowly walking toward you, but they won't arrive just yet. They need you to finish your season of solitude first, so when you meet, you'll bring each other your very best. So if you're in this phase, don't rush to end it. See the stillness as a gift. Spend time on things you've neglected. Take a morning walk alone, listen to old songs you used to love, or simply sit by the window and watch the sunlight move across the wall. The season of solitude is the quiet space where you return to yourself, and when you truly reconnect, you'll be ready for new relationships, ones that don't require you to pretend or shrink yourself. And when the springtime of your soul arrives, you'll know that winter was never a loss. There's a stage that almost everyone on the awakening journey has to go through. I call it the season of solitude. It sounds sad, doesn't it? But it's not the dark, heavy loneliness you might imagine. It's more like winter, quiet, a little cold, but also the time when the soil rests, preparing for the spring to bloom. I remember a man who once came to see me. He was 55, a businessman who had spent nearly his entire life in endless meetings, parties, and social obligations. Then, after a major life event, he started meditating every morning. Slowly, he lost interest in large gatherings. Old friends would invite him out, but he'd make excuses. His wife asked, "Why don't you see people as much anymore?" He just shook his head. He didn't fully understand it himself. I told him, "Maybe you're in your season of solitude." He looked at me, surprised, as if I'd just given him something that was both strange and comforting at the same time. Have you ever felt that way? The people around you are still there, but the space between you and them feels wider, not because you're upset with them, but because your soul needs room to breathe. From a spiritual perspective, this is when you're clearing your energetic field. You're like a glass that's been filled with too many impurities, heavy conversations, emotions borrowed from others, obligations you carried just to avoid disappointing someone. The season of solitude is when you pour it all out, so the glass can be empty again. Modern science has its own explanation. When you shift your awareness, your nervous system needs time to recalibrate. Environments that are too noisy or overstimulating can overwhelm your brain. Just like a body needs rest after surgery, the soul needs rest after an awakening. But I know, for many people, especially in their 50s or 60s, that feeling of, people call me less, or I'm seeing fewer friends, can trigger the question, am I becoming lonely? And that's when I want you to remember, solitude and loneliness are two very different states. Loneliness is when you crave connection but can't find it. Solitude is when you choose stillness because you know it's healing you. I often tell my students, trust your season of solitude, because once your energy is cleansed, you'll naturally draw in new relationships, people who speak to you with genuine warmth, not out of obligation. They come not to fill an empty space, but to create something real with you. I want you to picture this. You're standing in a softly lit room. There's no noise, just the sound of your heartbeat. Out there, new friends are slowly walking toward you, but they won't arrive just yet. They need you to finish your season of solitude first, so when you meet, you'll bring each other your very best. So if you're in this phase, don't rush to end it. See the stillness as a gift. Spend time on things you've neglected. Take a morning walk alone, listen to old songs you used to love, or simply sit by the window and watch the sunlight move across the wall. The season of solitude is the quiet space where you return to yourself. And when you truly reconnect, you'll be ready for new relationships, ones that don't require you to pretend or shrink yourself. And when the springtime of your soul arrives, you'll know that winter was never a loss. You know, a lot of people think spiritual awakening is only about the soul or consciousness. But in my experience, and in what modern neuroscience is starting to confirm, it's also a full-on biological upgrade. I want you to picture your nervous system like an electrical wiring system that's been running for decades. It's used to a certain voltage, the background noise of society, the pressure of work, the fast, relentless pace of life. Then one day, you step onto the path of awakening. Your awareness expands. The current running through you becomes stronger, more refined, more complex. And those old wires need to adjust so they don't overload. I once met a woman in her early 60s who had spent her life teaching in busy classrooms. After a major health scare, she began meditating every morning. Just a few weeks later, she noticed she couldn't stand the blaring TV anymore. Even the cheerful chatter at her local coffee shop started to feel sharp in her head. She asked me, "Am I getting weaker?" I smiled and said, "No. This means your nervous system is becoming more refined, not less." Have you ever felt that? Where sounds, lights, even the presence of certain people suddenly feel more intense? That's because when you awaken, your sensory filters widen. You start receiving more information, both physically and energetically, and your brain has to learn how to handle it without getting overwhelmed. Science calls this a shift in neuroregulation. When you spend more time in stillness, your nervous system moves from fight or flight into rest and restore. It's great for your heart, your immune system, and your focus, but it also means you're more sensitive to things you used to ignore. Here's how I explain it to my students. Don't see this as an inconvenience. Think of it like you just installed a high-end sound system. Now you can hear the most delicate notes in the music, but you'll also pick up the tiniest background noise. The solution isn't to turn everything off. It's to choose the music you want to listen to. And practice is the key. Deep breathing, meditation, slow walks in nature, all of these help your nervous system adapt to the higher voltage of your expanded awareness. With time, your sensitivity stops being a burden and becomes an asset. You feel the shift in a room's energy. You notice subtle cues in someone's eyes. You hear your intuition more clearly than ever. I want you to remember something. Your nervous system isn't just an on-off switch for your body. It's the bridge between your mind, your emotions, and your soul. When that bridge gets stronger, you don't just exist. You live more deeply, more presently. So if lately you've been more sensitive to noise, light, or crowds, don't panic. Smile. It's a sign you're upgrading, inside and out. And trust that in time, you'll know exactly how to let this new nervous system be your loyal ally, instead of your troublemaker. Because when your soul and body move in sync, that's when you're truly living your awakening. When people hear the word shadow in psychology, many instantly picture the ugly negative parts of themselves, something to be cut out or erased. But here's what I want you to know. Your shadow isn't just a container for fear, wounds, or mistakes. It's also where you've hidden pieces of your potential that you once rejected. Have you ever experienced this? Someone compliments you on your way with words, and you immediately brush it off. Oh, I'm not that good. Or maybe, as a child, you dreamed of painting, singing, or writing a book, but after a few hurtful comments or skeptical looks, You pack those dreams away into a deep, dark corner of your soul. That's how part of your light ends up buried in your shadow. Carl Jung, the renowned psychoanalyst, once said, "The shadow is everything about ourselves we do not wish to be." But here's the twist. Within that shadow, you don't just find the monsters of fear. You also discover the seeds of abilities that never had the chance to bloom. On the journey of awakening, the light of awareness begins to shine into those hidden corners. Suddenly you see, oh, this is why I always avoid conflict. Or wow, I criticize others because I was once criticized myself. It's freeing and uncomfortable. Freeing because you finally see the root of those unconscious reactions. Uncomfortable because you can't pretend you don't know anymore. I remember a 68-year-old man who once took my course. His whole life, he was known as the gentle, accommodating type. But during one sharing session, he broke down in tears and admitted, "I realized I haven't always been kind out of love. Sometimes it was just because I was afraid of being rejected. My kindness was a mask to hide my fear of not being enough." When he dared to face his shadow, he began to live more authentically. Still gentle, but no longer from a place of fear. Here's the tricky part. When your awareness expands, you start to see not only your own shadow, but the shadows of others. You notice that their words, actions, and habits often come from unhealed wounds. And without honesty and compassion, these interactions can feel heavy, because you can sense the mismatch between their true self and the mask they wear. At this point, you have two choices. You can pretend you don't see it, or you can learn to be present with the truth without judgment. This is a major lesson, because if we use our light only to point out other people's flaws, we fall into another kind of shadow, the shadow of spiritual arrogance. In my experience, the only way to soften the weight of the shadow is to invite it into the light with safety and kindness. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means seeing the root underneath it. When someone feels their shadow is acknowledged without being shamed, they finally have the courage to heal. Here's a small practice you can try. Spend a few minutes each day asking yourself, what did I react most strongly to today? And what does that reveal about my own shadow? You'll be amazed how many masks fall away with just that one question. And remember, the shadow is not the enemy of the light. They're two sides of the same coin. When you embrace both, you become more whole. You no longer waste energy hiding or pretending. You stand tall. Your light shines brighter precisely because you no longer fear your own darkness. Because in the end, awakening isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. And in that honesty, the shadow doesn't disappear. It merges with the light, creating a person who is deep, whole, and truly free. There's a subtle yet profound shift that many people don't notice when they go deeper into their awakening journey. The way we connect with others. In the past, you might have stayed close to someone for all sorts of reasons. Fear of being abandoned, a sense of obligation, or simply because these are the people I've always known. But as your inner world begins to change, a new voice rises inside you. Does this relationship allow me to be fully myself? Pause for a moment and really think about this. How many times in your life have you shrunk yourself to fit someone else's expectations? How many times have you stayed quiet when you wanted to speak or forced a polite laugh just so you wouldn't be labeled difficult? If your answer is, more times than I realized, you're not alone. We grow up in a world where love and acceptance often come with conditions. And to be loved, we learn to make ourselves smaller. One of my students, Michael, 58, once told me, "For years, I kept certain friendships alive just because I was afraid of being alone. We had nothing in common anymore, but I clung to them just to feel like I belonged somewhere. Now, I can't do that anymore. When I'm with them, I feel myself disappearing." That's the turning point, when you're no longer willing to trade pieces of yourself just to keep a connection alive. When awakening happens, the way you choose relationships changes. You start listening for resonance, for an energy you can't fake. New people show up, and you feel an almost strange relief when you're with them. You don't have to monitor every word you say. You don't have to hide your shadows or force yourself to be positive all the time just to deserve the friendship. And most importantly, they don't ask you to shrink yourself to fit their mold. From a psychological standpoint, This is far healthier than the old way of connecting. When you bond through resonance, your nervous system feels safe. You're not on high alert, constantly predicting someone's reactions. Instead, you're relaxed, open, and that nourishes both your mental and physical well-being. Of course, not everyone will welcome this shift. Some old connections will try to pull you back into your former self. They might say, "You've changed," or even, "You're not as fun as you used to be." It can sting, but remember, your change might make them feel uneasy because it reminds them of changes they're not ready to face. I often tell my students, resonance-based relationships don't have to be many, but they're rich in quality. Just a few deep, soul-level connections can fill your heart more than a crowded room where you can't be yourself. Now imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet cafe across from a new friend, someone who truly listens without interrupting, without rushing to give advice unless you ask. You feel a deep, grounding safety, like you don't need to perform or edit yourself. Your whole body exhales. That is the power of a resonance-based connection. And here's the beautiful thing. The more authentically you live, the more people like this you'll attract. Energy doesn't lie. When you're radiating the message, "I value myself and I won't trade that to be loved," you naturally draw people who are on that same wavelength. Sometimes this resonance even transcends language or circumstance. It's a quiet recognition. I see you, and I get you. Connections like this aren't always loud or dramatic. More often, they're steady and enduring, like a river that flows through both rain and drought, staying pure. And it's that steady flow that nourishes you over the long term. Remember, when you choose to connect through resonance instead of fear or obligation, you're sending yourself a powerful message. I am worthy of relationships where I get to be me. And once you truly believe that, life begins to rearrange itself to reflect that belief back to you. There's something most people don't expect when they step through the doorway of awakening. Their ability to sense energy becomes so sharp it's almost impossible to ignore. You realize you're no longer just hearing with your ears or seeing with your eyes. You're hearing with your skin and seeing with your heart. Before, you might walk into a room and notice the decor, the lighting, maybe the scent in the air. But now, the first thing you pick up on is the feeling. It's not a specific thought. It's a subtle wave that moves through your body. Some spaces feel like the air is wrapping its arms around you the moment you step in. Others make your chest feel heavy within seconds, and you can't quite explain why. Think back to a time when you were around someone and, for no obvious reason, you felt drained, even though they didn't say anything negative. Or the opposite. Someone simply standing next to you made you feel lighter, like they brought a fresh breeze with them. That's energy, and after awakening, your body becomes a finely tuned antenna for it. One of my former clients, Ellen, 62, once told me, "I just can't handle loud parties anymore. It's not that I don't like people. I just feel every single ripple of tension, every frown, every off-tone comment. I come home and need hours to feel like myself again." I smiled at her and said, "That's not weakness, Ellen. It's your nervous system becoming more refined. It's picking up on things you used to miss." The cost of this sensitivity is that you can't pretend like you used to. A cluttered room, a conversation with hidden tension, or even a text message with an urgent tone, all of it leaves an imprint in your body. You might notice your heart racing, your stomach tightening, or your shoulders stiffening. These aren't just passing feelings. They're real biological reactions. But I want you to see this as a gift, not a burden. Your ability to sense energy is a compass, guiding you toward environments that nourish you. When you start trusting these signals, you'll naturally avoid spaces and people that drain you and gravitate toward those that bring you back to life. Science is beginning to catch up too. Research on the human biofield shows that our bodies are constantly exchanging invisible information with the world around us. This helps explain why a space with greenery, natural light, and the sound of running water can lower heart rate and blood pressure. The tricky part is that when you become more sensitive, places you once felt comfortable might suddenly feel off. The same goes for certain long-term relationships. You can still love someone, but if their energy constantly carries pressure or tension, your body will start to resist. Sometimes you have to create space, not out of dislike, but out of self-respect. I often encourage my students to do an energy scan whenever they enter a new space. Pause for a few seconds and notice, is your breathing deeper or shallower? Are your shoulders relaxing or tensing? Is your heartbeat slowing down or speeding up? These tiny signals will tell you whether the space is nourishing you or depleting you. You'll find that when you choose environments that are in harmony with you, your soul feels calmer and your body begins to heal. And from that place, you can share your positive energy with others, not through words, but simply through your presence. So here's what I want you to remember. After awakening, your ability to sense energy isn't a curse. It's a sophisticated upgrade. It's a gift that helps you navigate life, choosing spaces and people that help you grow instead of shrink. And when you live from that place of sensitivity, the world around you becomes clearer, truer, and, finally, feels like home. There's a strange moment that many people go through after awakening, and I believe if you're watching this video, you've probably tasted it too. It's when you just know something before your mind has a chance to analyze it. It's not guessing. It's a flash of knowing, fast, clear, and almost electric. We call that intuition. Before, you may have relied mostly on logic, weighing pros and cons, making comparisons, building lists. But now, there are moments when your heart delivers the answer before your brain even starts its reasoning process. You meet someone for the first time, and in that very first look, you already know whether this is someone you want to build a relationship or work with. You read an email, and no matter how polished the words are, you can still sense that something underneath feels off. I remember one afternoon a few years ago when a woman named Margaret, 58, came to see me. She said, "I don't know why, but every time my daughter introduces me to a new boyfriend, I can tell within minutes if he's going to stay or leave. I don't want to be judgmental, but I'm always right. It feels both relieving and a little scary." I smiled and told her, "Margaret, that's your intuition operating on a higher frequency. It's not there to scare you. It's there to help you see what truly resonates with you and with the people you love." After awakening, your intuition's bandwidth expands. You don't just sense energy like I talked about earlier. You're also able to connect invisible pieces of information and arrive at insight faster and deeper. And if you learn to use this skill wisely, it becomes an invaluable tool for protecting your inner peace. The challenge is that our society trains us to worship logic and to doubt any feeling that doesn't come with proof. So at first, many people dismiss or second-guess their intuition. They think I'm probably just imagining things. But in my experience, if you ignore that inner voice too many times, you start to feel lost. That's why I often tell my students to practice catching the very first signal. When you enter a new situation, notice your immediate feeling, whether it's ease, hesitation, or a subtle tension, before your mind starts explaining it away. You don't have to act on it right then. Just acknowledge it. Over time, this builds your trust in your own intuition. Another powerful gift of heightened intuition is spotting inauthenticity. When someone's words say one thing but their energy sends another message, you'll feel a subtle mismatch. This isn't so you can judge or cut people off. It's so you know how to set the right boundaries. Intuition isn't a weapon to expose others. It's a compass that guides you toward relationships that are healthy and aligned. Maybe you've felt this before. You're in a pleasant conversation, yet deep down, you know you'll never call that person back. Or the opposite. You meet someone for just a few minutes, but it feels like you've known them for years. That's resonance. You and they are vibrating at a similar energetic frequency. Modern science is beginning to explore this phenomenon as subconscious decision-making, where your brain processes millions of tiny signals in an instant, from body language and tone of voice to micro-expressions on someone's face. But whether you call it the subconscious, intuition, or a gut feeling, the real question is, do you trust it enough to live by it? Intuition after awakening is like a quiet friend. It never shouts, it only whispers. But that whisper, if you pause and listen, will lead you to the relationships and environments your heart truly needs. It helps you choose quality over quantity, depth over surface. And when you begin to prioritize relationships filled with genuine resonance, life gets so much lighter. You no longer have to strain to fit in or hide your feelings. You get to be fully yourself, and that frees up an enormous amount of energy to live more fully and create more freely. So if you're in this stage of your journey, remember, your intuition is a gift. Tend to it like you'd care for a garden. Don't let the noise of the world drown out your inner voice. One day, when you're standing at a big crossroads, you'll know the answer. Not because someone told you, but because, deep down, you've always known. There's a reality most people don't talk about before stepping onto the awakening journey. Loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being physically alone, but the kind you feel in the middle of a crowd. You can still go to parties, chat with coworkers, or sit beside friends you've known for decades. Yet deep inside, there's an emptiness no one seems able to touch. Before, conversations about the news, fashion trends, or neighborhood gossip might have been enough to make you laugh. But now, they feel flat. You crave deep, soul-nourishing conversations about the meaning of life, about healing, about profound spiritual experiences. And finding someone to share that with can be surprisingly hard. I remember meeting John, a retired engineer, age 62. He told me back then my friends and I met every Friday night at the bar. We'd talk about sports, work, and family stuff. But after a health scare and starting meditation, I realized I had no interest in those conversations anymore. Now, whenever I sit with them, it's like listening to a language I no longer understand. I asked him, "And how does that make you feel?" He sighed, a little sad and a little lost. This is natural. When your frequency of awareness shifts, your need for connection shifts too. Old relationships aren't necessarily bad, but they no longer feed the deeper parts of you. It's like you've moved away from your old hometown to start a new life, and when you visit, you realize you don't belong there anymore. Psychologists call this loss of resonance in social relationships. When your values, beliefs, and priorities evolve, familiar interactions can feel exhausting. From a spiritual perspective, this is part of a cleansing process. You're making space for new, deeper, more authentic connections. The hardest part in this stage is learning to be okay with the silence. You might feel an ache when those old gatherings fade away, or when your circle of friends shrinks. But in that silence, you're actually learning to connect with yourself, and that's the foundation for building healthier connections in the future. I often tell my students, don't fear loneliness. See it as the time your energy system is recalibrating. Just like a garden needs to be cleared and prepared before planting, your inner world is being readied for the relationships that are yet to come. One way to ease the loneliness is to seek out communities that share your frequency, maybe a meditation group, a spiritual book club, or a life experience workshop. In those spaces, you'll meet people unafraid to talk about pain, loss, and deep spiritual insights. They won't try to fix you. They'll simply listen and walk beside you. That said, old relationships don't have to disappear completely. You can still keep them, knowing not every connection has to be profound. Some are just for laughter, for shared memories, and that's perfectly okay. Loneliness after awakening is an invitation to step out of your comfort zone in relationships. It asks you to have the courage to say no to interactions that force you to shrink yourself, and the patience to wait for your soul-aligned people to arrive. And trust me, when they do, you'll know instantly. The conversation won't drain you. It will leave you feeling alive, inspired, and full of energy. So if you're feeling lonely right now, remember, this isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. It's proof you're growing. This space you feel is necessary, not just to find people who speak your language, but to find the ones whose hearts beat in rhythm with yours.